Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I just want to open up my speech this afternoon to clarify a few things, especially for the member for Winnipeg South Centre and the member for Winnipeg North that seem to be confused about how Conservatives have voted on Bill C-35. The bill was voted at all stages and received unanimous consent from every member in this House. So, and I'll make it crystal clear now, when the amendment, which is what we're debating now, I support it.
Hear, hear.
So that's where I stand. I hope that's crystal clear to everybody. I don't have to answer that question later.
Exactly.
What I do appreciate the opportunity to bring up and talk about today is the opportunity to focus on the concerns that I'm hearing from daycares and parents from right across my riding of Bruce Grey Owen Sound. And I'm going to back this up with data. And in fact, I want to highlight we actually need more data, specifically around the impact that this program is having, mainly due to the lack of labor, lack of early childhood educators, to pre and after school programs in this across the country. So I actually would encourage the government to listen and go out and seek that data, because unlike maybe what's happened, and I've had this conversation with some of my colleagues from Quebec, who's had a program that I would argue has been quite successful in La Belle Province. However, the reason it's worked is they actually implemented it over time, and they didn't just jam it down the throats and basically hold a gun or a bag of money to the provinces and territories to implement something without actually thinking out all the consequences.
Sure.
So I want to give you a quote, Madam Speaker. Here's the quote. Again, we see the Liberals promising what they cannot deliver. $10 a day daycare does not address the labor shortages and the lack of spaces. I will guarantee today that if and when this strategy fails and has not delivered affordable childcare for all those in need across Canada in all jurisdictions, the Liberal government will blame the provinces and territories for that failure. Unquote. You know who said that, Madam Speaker? Me. I said that during my speech last spring when we were first debating this bill, and I will still hold that this is what we're hearing today now from daycare and providers across the country.
That's awesome.
So let's talk some data and news coverage, Madam Speaker, that we're hearing from across the country right now, all within the last few weeks. 77% of high-income parents across childcare or parents access childcare versus only 41% of low-income families was just reported earlier this month. I'm actually trying to struggle for a government that talks about the child care benefit, which, you know, makes sense. It's actually, I support its income means, it's means tested, how they've implemented a program that is actually taken away from lower income Canadians because of the demand for people that are making $1 million a year to get this.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me personally, and I just don't understand why this government would bring something like that in. Another quote from StatsCan, 46.4% of parents are reporting difficulty finding childcare in 2023, which is up from the 36.4% in 2019. Another StatsCan stat, in 2023, 26% of parents and children aged 0 to 5 years were not using childcare, who were not using childcare reported that their child was on a wait list, up from the 19% in 2022. Another headline in CBC, Sharon Gregson of the Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC says, while there are 130,000 licensed childcare spaces in the province, 75% of children aged 0 to 12 aren't able to access them. So what I want to get in now is actually, I'm not going to use my words, Madam Speaker. I'm going to read from emails that I received today. Found out I got to get, I had the opportunity to speak to this today. I reached out to the daycare, childcare providers across my riding, and I've got pages of feedback in hours addressing the concerns that they have around this program. And some of the comments were, I would have provided you a lot more, but I didn't have time. From one childcare here, one nursery school. Although we believe in the concept, the current model is not sustainable. Our school is not receiving the funding needed. It doesn't take into consideration inflation. Inflation funding through this Canada-wide early learning child care is significantly lower than the actual increased cost of operation. 2023 inflation funding was only 2.75%, which is a decrease from earlier at 2.1. Non-registered early childhood educators, which actually fill 45% of the workforce, are completely neglected in the wage funding calculations. In this one school's program, we have a wait list of over 100 families. Most of the children on the wait list will age out before they get a spot at our school. Another nursery school. The private independent centers are not the only centers raising deep concerns over this program. Some concerns from members in the private centers in the Ontario Association of Independent Childcare Centers are currently looking to opt out of the program if they haven't opted out already. In fact, 70% of these centers, then they're all volunteer-led, are looking to opt out before or when the cost-based funding comes out. Another comment, there's been a huge increase in order to meet the demands of this program and the administrative time needed, and this has pulled administrators away from other classroom activities that they were used to be able to do. As they do not feel they can stay in the program and deliver the programming and quality of care for which the center stands. For their families, in one case here, and again in my in Ontario where I reside, this means that daycare fees will go up from $525 to over $1,000 a month, or over $12,000 in the year. Another comment they made, incremental funding adjustments have not kept pace with the rising operational costs. This is far from sufficient to cover the increased expenses over the last 2 years. They're looking for more detailed guidance and clarity on the implementation. This uncertainty is just creating challenges for the providers to plan and ensure the continued delivery of the high quality care that they deliver. Without this adequate support and flexibility in funding, providers are now considering opting out of the program. But they provide some recommendations. So listen up, this is the important part. It urges all levels of government to work together to do the following. Re-evaluate the funding model to ensure it accurately reflects the rising costs of providing high-quality childcare, including considering direct funding to families or continued revenue replacement for providers. Another recommendation, engage in meaningful consultation with the childcare providers and parents to understand the challenges and adjust this Canada-wide early learning childcare program to better meet the needs of all stakeholders. Follow the Quebec lead, where families that cannot access centers in the program can claim costs separately for the childcare they choose. This allows parents to choose the childcare that is right for their family and ensure that it's affordable. Some may want Montessori, some academic, some forest schools, or child mining in their homes. Parents should have the choice. From the Y, right? They're urging additional recruitment of newcomers into the early childhood education system by prioritizing early childhood education as an in-demand profession and recognize their home country credentials. And as well, they should increase investments into these accelerated early childhood educator assistant training programs, in addition to increasing compensation levels for assistants working in the sectors. I recognize part of this is at the provincial level to implement, but the feedback we're getting from the provinces and territories, the government hasn't funded appropriately. Specifically, the Y in my riding, Madam Speaker, they're short 10 full-time child care educators for their toddler and preschool programs to achieve capacity. This translates into potentially that they could have another 59 new children from their substantial wait lists. I'm going to get into the wait list data here shortly. And but they can only then increase their capacity for the school-age programs, and I'm going to get into this later, Madam Speaker. They can only do that if they have the necessary educators. Yet another child care and family education center. The increases we are experiencing in utilities, food, rents, and supplies have been staggering. The funding we receive does not cover our costs. It's not hard to see why our educators are leaving the sector. This program is surviving on the backs of the low-paid, hard-working educators. The additional paperwork, reporting, reconciling is adding so much work to our administrative team who are already struggling with so many other requirements. We cannot and will not be able to meet the demand for childcare. Parents are struggling to find a space to benefit from the Canada-wide early learning childcare reduced rates. They currently operate the one program over 527 licensed childcare spaces across their locations that includes toddlers, preschoolers, and school age. Their wait list was sitting at 790 for their program as of February 15th, and they would guarantee that this number would actually be higher if they counted the wait list today. There's not one day that goes by that they're not faced with challenges with the current program. This system should be funded appropriately and equitably if it's to succeed. Parents are faced with the reality that without childcare, they cannot go to work. Parents are angry and frustrated and at this system that they didn't have proper say into. From Grey County, one of my counties, both counties provided some good feedback here on some statistics. The average monthly number of children aged 0 to 6 years receiving the reduction is 1,231. So some good news. There are 1,231 kids that are getting some benefit in my one county. However, as of December 31st of this past year, 1,835 children are reported to be on the wait list. Child care operators, again, continue to report ongoing issues recruiting and retaining qualified staff, limiting the ability of some of these programs to operate at full license capacity. Again, concerns over the wage floor and the delay in the implementation of the funding model. Specifically, though, I'd asked them to follow up, and this is what I hinted at earlier in my speech, Madam Speaker, about the impact that the program is having on the pre or before and after school programs. And they're basically operating at a lower number than their licensed capacity. In Grey County alone, there's 730 licensed spaces for children 6 to 12 in the before and after school programs. However, as of December 31st, there's over 166 children reported to be on the wait lists. And the main reason the operators report that they are only operating at that 60 to 75% of their capacity is because they had to move staff to the full day program for 0 to 6. As well, they have problem recruiting the staff because of the shift requirements around the before and after school program. They're continuing to work with the operators in the child care centers on recruitment and retention strategies in an effort to fix this. So, I mean, they are trying to do their best at their level. I want to share, though, the impact on somebody I know personally, a single parent. The impact this has had on them, because since this program was signed, they've now lost their pre and after school program. They have to drop their child off at 10 to 9 in the morning and pick the child up every day at 3:40. For a single parent, how do you do that? Who works a 6-hour day?
Liberals.
Right? It's very, very, unmanageable. And if it wasn't for the flexibility, relying on friends, relying on other family members, you're basically left with a program now where we're taking maybe lucky parents that were, or single parents that were able to go back into the workforce under this program maybe. Again, we're still missing the necessary staff and enough early childhood educators. But in 2 years or whenever they've aged out and they're now trying to look for that they got to quit work because they can no longer keep their job. And this has even a larger impact on the gig economy and those shift workers that do not have the flexibility to show up from 9 to 5, right? There's so many workers, especially lower income workers in this country, that are dependent upon that flexibility of the pre and after school programs that were available but have been negatively impacted by this current program. So from another one of my, from Bruce County, I have the pleasure of representing most of Grey County, or all but one municipality, a very important part for Blue Mountains that my colleague from Simcoe Grey represents, and the top half of Bruce County. But what Bruce County's talked about, and some of it's positive, right? Affordable childcare, and fully agree. I think everybody in this whole house has fully agreed. We've made these statements a number of times here in the chamber. Affordable childcare is a critical component to addressing inflationary cost of living concerns, economic growth, workforce participation, and declining economic conditions that have disproportionately impacted women. However, child care providers have expressed concern about their financial viability. Additional operating funding is also required to maintain these spaces and ensure child care operators have sustained, predictable, and adequate support to continue in the program. Full funding is required. Workforce challenges remain a barrier to expanding early years and child care access. To ensure the success of the early childhood program, workforce challenges must be resolved quickly with increased compensation and benefits to reflect the education, skill sets, and value of these early childhood educators. Some specific data out of Bruce County. They need the expansion in order to meet the demand of just the access and inclusion framework of 645 new child care spaces requires another 100 to 130 additional ECEs in the sector to accommodate the child-to-staff ratios. There are currently 1,243 children on the Bruce County centralized wait list who required licensed daycare. Some good news here, Bruce County is co-leading a Bruce Gray registered early childhood educator recruitment and retention working group that includes membership and support from the local colleges, boards of education, workplace engagement services, and corporate communications to develop and implement local ECE recruitment and retention strategies. To support the need for this, they've actually partnered with Fanshawe College to offer a part-time early childhood education program, which is being offered locally in our region. That's and there's this school year alone, there's 32 students participating in that program. Let's do the math. 32 new early childhood educators. That frees up somewhere between 150 and 250 of the spaces that are still needed once we get them, these early childhood educators into the workforce, but there's over 1,250 needed. So it's only a drop in the bucket, and we need to do more, and that's guaranteeing that all of these ECEs actually qualify or stay in the program and choose to get into this. So I'm coming to the end near the end of my speech. I just want to highlight a few of the points that I've flagged before when we had the privilege of debating this. This is all access. This program is difficult to work, especially in rural Canada, if the spaces don't exist, if the staff don't exist, and this is something that needs to be done because otherwise parents out there, families can't access these subsidized rates. Labor shortages. This is something that hasn't changed. I highlighted the data very, very clearly that this is great with these lower costs, but they don't exist if parents can't actually get to the access to the programs themselves. And the rising operating costs. I highlighted this. We knew it was coming even last year, that the funding that's currently set out through the federal government to the provinces and territories does not cover the expenses of many of the organizations that are being asked to deliver this. So in conclusion, Madam Speaker, affordable quality childcare is critical, but if you can't access it, it doesn't exist. And again, this bill specifically actually does nothing to address the accessibility challenge. All Canadian families should have access to affordable and quality childcare and should be able to choose the childcare providers that best suit their family needs. Bill C-35 is good for families who already have a childcare space, but it doesn't help the thousands of families on the childcare wait list or the operators who do not have the staff or infrastructure to offer more spaces. Again, we see the Liberals promising what they cannot deliver. Conservatives will support all forms of childcare, including traditional daycare centers, centers with extended part-time or overnight care, nurseries, flexible and drop-in care, before and after school care, preschools and co-op childcare, faith-based care, unique programming to support children with disabilities, home-based childcare, nannies and shared nannies, stay-at-home parents or guardians who raise their own children, family members, friends, or neighbors who provide care. So care for all. Thank you, Madam Speaker.